who grew up straight reading stuff, classical music. Sometimes this is a little bit mysterious sort of art, and it can be a little confusing because it's like, if you've got a praise band, all of a sudden you got three youth players who bought a guitar last week and they're in your band. Somebody has to tell them what these chords mean and what to play. What's a sus chord? What's a certain kind of chord? And if you have three people who've got a different understanding, then it can be a disaster in the sound and everything. So I'm going to explain this from beginning with Triad, which it'll sound too easy at first, so just bear with me. And then we're going to go sort of a step by step, and I'm going to tell you sort of analyze how to do all these chords and stuff. Now I will tell you that the first person who asks me a question gets a prize. And it's something that you cannot get in the United States. So just keep that in mind. So I want to encourage you to ask me any questions. And I'm glad the piano's real close, so you can just look at it and we can see it together. Now, I think probably all of you probably know these first four basic triads. But I'm going to go over them again just to make sure, because I'm going to sort of bounce off to show what these, the meaning and everything. A major chord consists of what? 2 whole steps and half step. So as we look at all the major chords, they're all identical. Whatever I start on, I start 1, or I start 2 steps and 1 and a half. And they're all identical. Now the minor, though, is how is that different from the major? Of course, with the minor fade. So it's the same thing, but you lower the third. So the intervals then is a step and a half plus 2 steps. It's backwards. So I got 1 and a half and then 2. All right, there's exactly opposite. Now notice the M in there. And when I said major, did I put a major beside the chord? We never have to know that a chord is major. It's assumed. Anytime major, it's never written to tell us it's a major chord. But anytime we see an M in a chord, that M refers to the third being lowered. Now, be real important just a minute here. Now, the other 2 chords, the diminished chords, how is that different from the minor chord? The fifth and the third are lower. And if we count on those intervals, we would see that it's 1 and a half plus what? 1 and a half. Okay? And so on. And then the augmented, how is that different from the major? It's a 2 plus 2. You just raise the fifth. All right? Now that seems pretty easy to start with, and it is. So let me see if I can make these a little bigger as I. Does that get bigger? Oh, yeah. So I might be able to. I wish it would turn the other way, but that's okay. So you can see each of those chords. Now I'm going to jump on now. We're going to jump ahead to the next page here, which this has to do with the 7th chords. Now the ones I want you to zero in on. Because if you can understand what we just did and understand these first 3 chords on the top here, what those mean, and it'll get you a long way. It'll get you to almost all the praise charts that you read right now. So as we look at that, I want you to look at the first one. It says C major 7. Okay? Now when we see C major 7, the major in there has nothing to do with what kind of chord it is. Never. Whenever you see major written in a chord, the major always tells you that the 7th in it is a major 7. That is a half step from the octave. Okay? That's sort of a nice, cool sort of sound to the major 7th chord. All right. So never look at the major. And in fact, in any part of any type of chord, if we had major 9, major 13, major 11, every time major is written, it always refers to the 7th. Never any other note. So whenever you see major, the 7th is a half step from the octave. It's the one that's in the scale, the leading tone. Okay? All right. So now how many of you actually knew that? Or got confused about it? Yes. So that's what I want to explain. And once you sort of understand this, and then you build on top of it, then all of a sudden it's, what did somebody tell me? So, the next one here I want you to look at the C7 chord. All right. Whenever we see a 7 in a chord, the 7 is always assumed to be a minor 7. Okay. Minor 7 simply means that it's the whole step from the octave. If here was the major 7, there's the minor 7. Now this particular chord is the dominant 7th chord. You know, if you went to Bible school like I did when you were young, you heard sit down, you know, whatever. You know, these type of chords, and you used to, you know, the 5-1 chord. And also it's used in blues. It's used in that sort of thing like they're a blues sort of sound. And rock and roll, Elvis songs use these type of chords on the one. But when you look, C7, we have two assumptions, two things we assume. We know the chord is major because there is no little m. It's major, it's assumed. But we know the 7th in the chord is a minor 7th because there's no M-A-J. Okay? So M-A-J always tells us the 7th is major, half step from the octave. And the M always tells us that the 3rd is minor. All right. Now we call the 7th on that C7 chord, we call that a minor 7th chord, 7th. But the M in there has nothing to do with it being a minor 7th interval. The M, little m, I'm going to skip to the next one, the C minor 7th chord. I think I threw myself off it. So the C minor 7th chord, when we hit on this one, has a minor 3rd in the chord, and that's because there's a little m. Okay? So it has a minor 7th in there. Why is the 7th minor? By looking at the symbol. Why is the 7th minor?
Because there's no major.
There's no major. The M has nothing to do with it, the little m. If you can understand those two concepts, you can go a long way in stacking these chords and getting all these fancy jazz chords and all. So all you have to remember is one of the things you have to remember, but one of the most important things is the M, the little m, always refers to the 3rd. Never, even though the 7th might be a minor, even though you can have a minor 9th interval in a chord, the M written in the chord always refers to the 3rd of the chord. All right? And then we just have to remember major always refers to the 7th. If I say major 7th chord, major 9th chord, major 11th, major 13th, the major written in there has to do, never has to do with any note except for the 7th. So minor, little m, always the 3rd, major. Now sometimes you'll see other symbols for these. The minor, sometimes you'll see it. I may have it up there written, I'm not sure. Let's see if I can make this a little bit bigger. I wish it was from wide, but I'm stuck on it. But y'all can see that clearly. My eyes aren't great, but so sometimes you'll see the major 7th in jazz music. Sometimes you'll see, and you may see it on a praise chart, you may see a triangle. If you saw C triangle 7, that would stand for major. In fact, you sort of think of that triangle as pointing up, so you can almost imagine it being a leading tone, you know, because it's pointing, you know, up or whatever. And sometimes you'll see the minor chord, instead of putting on a little m, sometimes you'll see just a little minus sign. That's not unusual. So if you got a chart, someone handed it to you, or you printed one from the internet because someone is having a funeral tomorrow and they want this song, and the only thing you can get is whatever you can find, and then you print it, and you got these symbols that, what does that mean?
So it just says C minor? I mean, there's no...
You can have a C minor chord. You could have just C and a minus symbol.
Okay.
Yeah, or a C minor would be just C little m.
Okay.
That's
But they're the same thing, the same chord.
You asked me a question.
Yeah.
You asked me a question, right?
Mm-hmm.
You get the prize. You're the first question, or somebody else
I hope it
asked
has
me.
keys.
Huh?
I hope it has keys.
Okay, I think I may have forgotten about my question, but if I did, forgive me if I overlooked some of your other questions too. So you get one of my piano books that was published in Triad in 2015. An arrangement of books, so you can't get it here. So
Well, you know what the titles are?
Well, actually, they're in, the titles are written in Korean, but you read, let me see, I'll read it to you. I will tell you the title. 내구주 예수로 도육 사랑 내주 되신 주로 참 사랑하라. Love, that's a love to thee medley. Actually reading and speak Korean, but not great. But anyway, but I have some of these in a book. If you're all around tomorrow or Thursday, I'm gonna give away some copies of. I printed one of my books that has some of these in there. That's on an online book and everything. But I left them in the motel today. So yeah.
Okay, I think I'm a little bit confused,
Sure.
because what I am, in my mind, when I'm looking at C7, okay, I'm thinking of a C major chord with the seventh that is in that scale
That's right.
on the top.
And that's not right.
Okay.
That's where you're
That is-
confused.
Okay.
Yeah. So the
Can you
yes.
straighten me out
Sure.
here?
So the C's, when you see, now forget about where you are in the scale right now. Just think
Okay.
about the actual symbol itself. Okay?
All right.
So if you see C7, it assumes two things. It assumes the chord is major because there's no little m written.
Mhm.
But the seventh is always minor. Minor means it's a whole step from the octave. It's, however, unless there's an MAJ.
Okay, but that, I guess that's what I was thinking, I mean, that's what I was looking at, if it's C major 7, then the seventh is the seventh that is in the scale of the
Yes,
chord.
depending on where the chord is in the
Yeah,
scale.
right.
Yes, so,
Okay.
so yes. But it, or the C major seventh, that seventh will always be a half step from the octave, from the name of the chord
Okay.
below it,
Mhm.
up an octave. All these little qualifications and everything.
Okay,
So-
so when it's C7 though,
Uh,
I mean, I play these chords all the time, and now I'm trying to figure them out.
Yes, yes. So like in, let's say in the major scale, in the seventh chords, if I, y'all want to do another key, let's say D. So in the key of D, the first chord in there is always, if you had the sevenths that fall in the scale, the diatonic notes, it would be D major seventh, and the key of D, which would be D, F sharp, A, C sharp. The second one is always a minor seventh, it'd be E, G, B, D. Third one, on the third note of the scale, would be F sharp, minor sevenths, would be F sharp, A, C sharp, E. But the fourth, like the one, is always a major seventh chord. So G, B, D, F sharp. But the 5 is the only one that's a pure seventh chord. That's the dominant. So I go to A7. So when I say A7, now notice that the 7 here that's in the scale that we're in now is a minor 7. You see, oh, I can't play the scale. That part of there it is. So A7. So and then the 6 is a minor 7th, and then the 7th of every key, the 7th chord is a half diminished chord. It's just and so on. So in every key, the 1 and the 4 naturally are major 7ths. Okay. The 2, the 3, and the 6 are naturally minor 7th chords, and the 5 is just a pure 7th. So let's just review what each of these means, because if you can get these 3 7ths down, you can go a long ways in knocking out the rest of this. So if I say, all right, let's just look at it on the piano. Tell me a note, and then let me go from there, and we'll see if we can figure it out. So give me a note.
Yeah.
F, that's a great note, okay? So if I say F, if I say F major 7, it's kind of a major chord, but the chord is major because it's assumed major. The 7th on it will be which note? E. Now, let's say I want an F minor 7. Now the minor,
You just said F7 or?
I said just F a minor 7 chord.
Okay.
All right, so if I say F minor 7, the F is it's a minor chord, so the middle note of the triad is A flat. But if I say minor 7, the 7th is assumed to be minor. So what's a minor 7 to E flat? Now, if I said F7, it's a major chord because there's no little m in it. But the seventh is assumed minor. Okay. So if you can get those three sort of in your minds, sort of down. Now after a while, as you start playing these chords, it'll just stick. But sometimes initially making sure you're thinking of them right. Because there's nothing wrong with being in a service and you got three people playing chord charts and you got three different understandings of what those chords mean, because then all of a sudden you just got these wild sort of clashes. And most of the time it's because nobody's ever explained it.
What would you recommend as a good just exercise for practicing, for learning this? Getting it in your head, getting it in your system.
Well, I would maybe start with, like on those three chords, maybe pick every note on the piano, or there's only 12 different ones, right?
Mm-hmm.
And just start with it. So let's say we start on E flat, E flat chord, E flat major seventh, add the E flat seven, add the D flat. Now E flat minor seventh, same as that, but I'll lower the third. All right. So just thinking about them. All right. Go to a B flat. So B flat major seven, B flat with a what? A. B flat seven as A flat, with the same major chord, and B flat minor seven, just lower that. And or sometimes it helps to what I was talking about, the context of the scale sometimes, thinking of what naturally falls in every single scale. And every single scale, if I start on C, the first on the scale is a major seventh chord. If I just use just the notes, stacking them like leapfrogging them, over the next third, the second one is always a minor seventh chord. The third one, always a minor seventh chord. The fourth one, like the one, is a major seventh chord. The five is the only one that's a naturally seventh chord. Now we have lots of secondary dominants that we use in songs, which means we turn a minor into a major, And then the six is always a minor seventh. Now the seven, we don't worry about it too much, but it's a half diminished chord, and I'll explain that in a minute. It means it's got a diminished triad, but a minor seven. But it acts just like the dominant. See, if I add the G on bottom of that one, it functions in the same way. And if you remember, how many of you have taken theory where you studied secondary dominants, where you also studied secondary leading tone triads? And those are basically they act in the same way and everything. But okay, so let's look at some of these other ones here, and then we'll go on. So, and what I'm going to do on this, by the way, this next one is I'm going to look at. Once you find the chords, then what? I'm going to show you some ways to do complement patterns and these sort of things. So let me plow through some of this up here and look at some of these other chords again. I'm going to make this a little bigger. And then see if I can shift it a little bit. Let's see. I'll do it sometime. Okay, now look at this. This one, you can have a minor chord that has a major seventh. All right, so the ones we've talked about are those three: the major seventh, minor seventh, and the seventh chord. But I call this one the James Bond chord. So it's you've heard that sort of sound? So if you had a minor chord and if you had a major seventh in it, you would put in parentheses that major seventh. Otherwise, it'd be sort of confusing. C minor, major. So in parentheses, you sort of set it off. So sometimes you do see that. So if you see C minor and then minor and in parentheses major seventh, that just means it's a minor chord, and then it just means that the seventh is the major seventh. Because in the C minor seventh chord, the seventh is naturally minor. Sevenths are always assumed to be minor unless we see a MHA. The chord is always assumed to be major unless we see a little M, or diminished or augmented. All right, so some of these other chords, I'll just look at them real fast here. Now on the, let's see if I can go over sometimes you'll see that. Sometimes you'll see a C plus 7. Now you'll see a lot of jazz and stuff. So if I'm in C, yeah. You see that C plus 7 simply means that the triad is an augmented triad, but the 7 is assumed to be minor. You hear that sort of a lot of in little sort of pop music sometimes and everything. The next one, the C minor 7th flat 5. Now this is really what we call a half diminished chord. All right, half diminished chord is simply a diminished triad. Remember, that's got 1.5 steps plus 1.5, plus it has a minor 7th. All right, that's the one that naturally falls on the 7th note of the scale. All right, so if I write on the 7th note of the scale, that B minor. Now technically we would write that as, if we wanted to be more classically oriented, we would write it as C with a circle for diminished, with a slash through it for half diminished, and then put 7. Makes it, we write, that would be C, circle with a slash through. You want me to write that out, or I thought I was kind of a board in here, but I don't see one, so I'll write.
Sitting behind the curtain.
Oh, is it? Oh, that's too far away. Okay, so this is the sort of the classical symbol for that. Or if you saw this in on your Roman numeral analysis or this sort of thing. So it's half diminished. And what half diminished means, and half diminished always only relates if there's a 7. Okay, because the half diminished simply means that the 7th in it isn't a fully diminished 7th, but is a minor 7th. The fully diminished 7th, I'll show that to you in just a minute, is one that's a step and a half down from the octave.
So this is a diminished triad with a
Minor 7th, a half diminished. But what happens on these pop jazz chords, charts and stuff, that they figured that most players, it'd be easier for them to understand a minor 7th chord and see in there lower the 5th than it would be to some, because most of your players probably haven't had classical theory with, half diminished stuff, so they instead they think it's easier to write the minor 7th chord, but write it in parentheses flat the 5. Okay, so it's really just a half diminished chord, but most of the time, almost every time, and when I do anthems or somebody asks me to do a chord chart for anthems, or I'm arranging something, publication, I always put it that way, and never as a half diminished chord. So we'll get to the next one though. And I use that chord. I love that chord. But the next one, the C diminished 7th. This is one that's it's a fully diminished 7th chord. So that means that every single interval in it is a step and a half. Okay, so this is a great one. Remember the old cartoon where they've tied the girl on the railroad tracks and it's better again, whatever. It has that sort of that quality to it. Actually, it's one that was used. If I had time, used a lot in Beethoven's day for modulation, because whenever you do a diminished chord like that, you can lower any note of the chord and it becomes a dominant 7th chord for one of 4 keys. It's a sort of fascinating, on how the ways you could do that. But in the so the fully diminished chord. So if you saw C circle 7, this one means that it's got a diminished chord, but the 7 is a step and a half down from the octave.
So what if you just had the diminished triad with, let's say, a minor 7?
Well, that would be the half diminished chord. If it was a diminished triad and had a minor 7, that's what the half diminished means. That means it's not all the way diminished, it's half diminished. So we would call that one, what you just said, we would call it C minor 7 flat 5. See, when you hold a minor chord and I flat the 5, what does it become? A diminished chord.
Diminished chord.
Yeah. So that's what that would be. And that's what is naturally occurs on every seventh note of the scale. Because if you're on every single scale, I know this is a lot to get your head around. but on all this stuff that I'm showing right now, as I mentioned, it's on my, if you went to my website, jamesmstevens.com, right at the top on the left, there's a thing that says free improv downloads. If you click on that, you would find this thing, and I've got explanations on all these too. So, but I figured it'd be better just to show it and tell you where it is, and to load you up with a stack of papers that would get lost or whatever. So anyway, but the diminished chord is interesting because in a sense there's only three of them. Let's think about why that is. Because if I take a diminished chord, let's think of the notes: it's C, E flat, F, G flat, and A, depending on what key you're in. Take everything up a half step, it's C sharp, E, G, and B flat. If I go up one more half step, it's D, F, A flat, and B. But if I go up one more half step, where I'm at, E flat. It's the same notes as the first one, because they're all equal distances from themselves. So in these fully diminished seven chords, you can play them in any inversion, and they'll still come out exactly the same because the difference between the notes. And someone says a fully diminished chord is like life because it keeps inverting for something, So, but anyway, it's an interesting chord and a lot of things you can do it. And you hear a lot of times in gospel music, you hear it in types like that where it sort of leans into something, and you hear it in all kinds of so it's a very familiar chord to use. Now, if you weren't sure if it was going to be a diminished seventh or a half diminished seventh, just skip the seven. Just play those bottom three notes, and it's all the same because it's the only thing difference between the two is the seventh. There. So, all right. So let me just move ahead to the next little part here. It's a little different sort of thing, if I can. Let's try it here. So, but at the bottom again, reviewing. If do you understand? Make sense on that major seventh, the seventh, and the minor seventh. All right. Now let's look on to the next little batch here. Now these are real important here. Let's make it a little bit bigger. And can be some of the most commonly confused chords there are. And this, and that's the sus chords. All right. Do you ever see one that says something sus? And you ever wondered, well, I think I know what it means, but I'm not completely 100% sure all the time. So I'm going to go over those because you see them frequently. So there's something hiding up my one little thing there. Let's see. Toolbar. Okay. So whenever we see C sus, what that means is that you take the third and you replace it with a four. That's all it means. It could be written as C sus 4. However, it's always assumed, if it says just C sus, that whatever chord it is, the third has been replaced with a fourth. And the fourth it's replaced with is the fourth that's a half step above it. All right, so it's whatever's a half step above. We hear it all the time. That'd be an easy one to practice. Play all the triads, and then do the sus of it by just raising the third. Sort of got an amen sound to it. And then suspended and resolves. D, D, F sharp, A. D sus would be what? D, G, A. Now C sus 2. Now, C sus 2 is the same thing except for you replace the 3 with the 2. Like so. Now, sometimes, I'm going to show you, let me show you the, I'll get through these first 4 and then I'll explain the difference on that. So technically that's a C sus 2. But if you look at the fourth one over there, you'll see C2. Whenever you see C2, that means you take the major chord or the minor chord and you just squeeze in the 2 with it. It gives it sort of a plush, sort of sound. Now, a lot of times, the reason I jump over that one is a lot of times in contemporary music, you'll see the C2 with guitars playing and stuff. Sometimes when they say C2 or some kind of 2 chord, they don't really mean this chord with this. They mean C sus2. But the reason is because the guitar cannot play because of the way their strings are except for one voiced a fourth apart. They can't actually play this cluster like this. So it's really impossible to play it unless you got some weird stretch or something to do that. So when they put C2, whether they wanted to or not, this is really all they can come up with. But
so if on the piano, if the pianists were playing what it really is, it would sound okay then if the guitars?
it would probably sound okay, but however, sometimes you're better just to go with the flow. So if you realize that's what's happening, and that they're really playing this more of an open sound, because it's and both of these sound good on occasion. You can always add the two on any hymn you're doing. Amazing grace, how it has that sort of spacious quality. But you can always also on those same chords you can always leave out the third and just have just the two. Amazing grace. It has that sort of more ambient, sort of open sound. So my suggestion on that, and I'm telling you what it really means, but if you're in the heat of battle, don't argue with them. Just understand what's going on and just leave it out. You know, unless it's specifically called for. Now, if you were doing a choral anthem and you saw this written on a piece of choral music, almost always they're going to be writing, when they say C2, they mean the 2 is added into the triad. It's just what I call an added note chord. Now on the sometimes you'll see C sus4-2. All that means you're just replacing. You're always, when you see C sus, any kind of sus, you're always replacing the third with something. If you see sus4 or sus, replace it with a 4. If you see sus2, replace it with a 2. C sus4-2, you just take the third out, put them both in. And then they may resolve or it may not. So I don't feel dejected if you're playing the sus chord, nothing ever came back or whatever. So now look at the on the bottom here on the C minor 2. Now the C, this is something you see pretty often too. But on the minor chord, when we add the 2, it's not quite as smooth a sound, but you still hear it a lot. You remember Nadia's theme, you know, whatever. You hear those sort of types of sounds, and it sounds good. And if you felt like anytime you were playing a minor chord on a certain type of thing, you can always throw in that 2 as well, and it gives that certain sound. If you like it, if you hear that sound, you think that's sort of cool, then you know where it is. It's just add the 2 in there with it. Now sometimes you'll have this. Anytime you see C6 or C minor 6. The 6 is also an added note chord. Whenever you see 6, it means whatever chord that is, C major or C minor, just throw in the 6. And the 6 you throw in would be a whole step above the 5th. Alright, so remember the old song, Ain't She Sweet? Ain't She Sweet? It has sort of a candied sort of sound, or you hear sometimes I'm like, great and mighty is the Lord our God. You hear that? It has sort of a candy-coated sound. I mean, it's just real sweet. So, or great and mighty is He. Cha-cha-cha-cha. You hear it. Joe played some of that on one of those songs this morning. I forgot what it was. He threw in the 6 on just to give it that little bit of a sound. Now this next one, the C, is that 6-9? The C6-9, that's an added note chord too. You just add in the 6 and the 9. You hear this a fair amount. It's like a bell sort of sound. Listen. Can you hear it like so? It just has a
So how is the 9th different from the 2nd?
Yes, let me get down to the where's the 9th? The C add 9. That's a good question. C add 9 is the same as the C2, except when you write, if you played a C2 and saw a C add 9, in a sense they're the same, except for when you see add 9, it means there's a sort of a preference for the 9 to be on top. But it's the same exact notes. So C add 9. You ever heard the song Midnight Cowboy? You hear that sort of leaning sort of sound, but it means that the ninth is going to be on top. But this chord is a C2 chord. See, because there's the 2. But if I say C add 9, it's the same notes. It's just the 9 is saying I prefer for you to put that 9 up high.
But in the C6 and 9, there is no preference.
There's not. A lot of times you might have the 5th on top, the 9th underneath it, and the 6th, and then a fat open triad at the bottom. Sometimes you'll have that. Or you might have it another. In fact, usually that is sort of more the way you would hear that voice. And some of these chords are tend to be voiced a certain way. Let me see. There's a chord underneath that C minor 2. I don't think there is. Good. All right. Now let's jump down before we get to the. And these are very important. You're going to see this stuff all the time, and you've got to understand what it means. And that's inversions and alternate basses and slash chords. But before I get there, am I doing good on time? I think I'm okay. So, I left out 2 chords on this thing that you actually do see a lot on contemporary charts showing up now. So let me tell you what those 2 are. These are sort of important. If I saw C4, that is not a C suspended chord. C4, and we see this some on charts now, is a C chord with a 4 thrown in there. You'll actually see that chord on some contemporary, so like a C chord and you're squeezing the 4 with it. So sometimes on some tense moments and a progression, you'll have that sort of thing. I see it on some of these contemporary songs, up there. So C4 would mean a major chord and throw the 4 in with it. Just let that flash be in there. Let it be ugly if it sounds ugly to you, but that's what it is. However, C5 means leave out the 3rd. If I were to see a C5, or something like that, or B flat 5, that means leave the 3rd out. It's just an open power chord. Guitarists will play whatever.
I see that one a lot, and I'm just thinking, man, this is so boring. What do you do with that? Trying to fill in.
Well, it has sort of open sound,
What to do with
but there is something that that it is good to do with it. That's not meant to be good to do with it. But if you're having a war among your other players on one of them's playing, you don't know if the guy's going to play a sus chord or a major chord, and you're not sure which one he's going to do. C5, and that way you don't have to worry about if you got the 3rd or the 4th. So sometimes you can play that open sound and sometimes, like if you're playing with band, you can play that open sound to sort of keep out of the way a little bit. If there's some more things that are going on, it's boring. In fact, when we start, I play like a worship band every Sunday, and the more people you add to a thing, the less everybody needs to play. And a lot of times, what happens when we first start adding instruments, everybody just plays the same amount of stuff they always play, and then you just have it sounds like it's just too much. So as you add people playing, everybody has to sort of back off how much they're playing or how thick the textures are at times, or at least take turns and everything. So, all right, these next ones here, these are important because these are sometimes nicknamed slash chords. But how many of you know what that means? What does it mean?
Well, you're going to play not the root, but you're going to play whatever note is behind that slash. In front of the slash.
As the chord.
Yeah.
Yeah, and behind it, that's the bass note. So whenever you see that, the first one you see, the one on the left, is always the name of the chord. The one on the right is merely the bass note. It's the bottom. That's all. It's not a chord. Now we could have fancy chords and some 20th century harmony that we would call polychords. You might have if I had played a D13 sharp 11 chord, like in the song, I get to the that sort of sound. I could look at that and say it was a D7 on top of a C7, and that would be right, but we don't do that like that. So whenever you see the slash chord, the one on the right is always just the bass note. The one on the left is the chord. All right. So if the bass player would play that one on the right, the organ player would hit that one on the right with their pedal. That would be their pedal note, and the one on the left would be the chord. Now it may not be when I teach tomorrow. I think it's tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. 8 o'clock, I'm going to be teaching how to modulate from any key to any key, and make it sound smooth and easy. And I'll show you how to do it. Most people only do, a few ways. But I'll teach you how to do that. But for one of the chords I use is this first one here. It's like a C over D chord. It's like a fourth. If I was in the key of G, it'd be like the fourth chord with a 5 in the bass. You hear a lot of that in pop music, but it's a great chord to use on transitioning with some other techniques as well. But notice on some of these, if I say inversions and alternate basses, because the first one there, the C over D, is that a chord that's an inversion? It's not, because that D is not in the C chord. But on the second one, the C minor over E flat, we could say that was a C minor that was in first inversion, because the E flat is in the C minor chord. All right, but don't worry about which it is. Just play it. And these pop jazz chords are not written in thinking. When I teach classical theory, Roman numeral analysis, and also the national number system. That's a whole other thing in and of itself. It's sort of a compromise between the two. But in classical Roman numeral analysis, it cares about the context of the whole music, everything that's going on, how it relates to each other. Pop jazz could care less. It's just, what's the quickest way I can get you to hit the right notes? I'm not really concerned about how this fits and how this functions. It's just, give me the notes and let's be done with it. So then that's what. So don't worry about if it's inversion, alternate bass. Just remember the left one on the left's the chord, on the right is only the bass. It's just the bottom note. Okay. So let's jump to 9 chords now. If I can get over there, let's see if I get lucky. Okay. Yay. Okay. So let's look at these. A lot of times on your stuff you may see some 9 chords. So, but the same rules apply. All right. Look at C major 9. Let me ask you a pop quiz. Okay. So C major 9, is it a major or minor chord?
Yes.
And how do I know that it's major?
There's no small M.
There's no small m. The major has nothing to do with it. Okay. So the 9 in the chord, is that a major 9 or a minor 9? Well, I'm just.
It's gonna be a major, because I thought, let me see if I got this.
See, I'm trying to get you to follow my trap. So that's
Okay, so if it has major there, that's only referring to a 7.
always.
Okay.
Always.
Good, I got something.
Yeah. So, however, in the C major 9 chord and the C minor 9 chord, they both have the same 9, and it is a major 9, meaning that it's the 9 that naturally falls in the major scale, but it's also the 9 in the minor scale. Unless you're in Phrygian mode, the second step is going to be major. All the major modes and all the minor modes. If I went and I don't mind going through all of them, but on the Phrygian, but all of them, the 9 would be a major 9. Okay, so whenever I see these chords up here, the major 9, it's a major chord. The 7's major because of the major in it refers to the 7, and the 9 is just it's just a regular 9. So the major has nothing to do with the 9.
So it just follows the scale.
Yes, very flush chord, very. And in fact, anytime you're playing the major 7th chord, anytime you're playing the major 7th chord, you can add the 2 to it, or listen to the major 7th chord. You can add the 2. Here's just the major. You can add the two, and it'll be a major 9 chord. All right. Now the C9. All right. The C9, is it a major chord or minor?
Major chord.
Because there's no little wing. What kind of 7? Is that major or minor? A flat 7, a minor 7, because there's no MAJ. And the 9 in it is going to be naturally a normal 9, which is a whole step above the octave. Okay? So the
A minor 7, and what major?
well, on both those 9s there, the 9 will be naturally, we could call it a major 9, but I don't want to confuse you by thinking the term. The 9 in both of them are just going to be the whole step above it's the second note of the scale, up an octave. And then the major scale and the minor scale, up an octave, they're both a whole step. That's what naturally falls on that. However, there's some other ones I'll show down here in a minute here. All right, but look at the minor 9. It's a beautiful chord, I love it. Got a minor triad because the little M, because it's minor. It has a 7th minor because there's no MAJ. And then it has the same 9 as the other one. And so, all right. So, now let me see if I can scoop this over just a fraction here, and then I'll show you some other ones that you see sometimes. All right. So here on this one that's on the end here, I've got C7 flat 9. So if it ever has a different 9, that 9 will be in parentheses. All right. So you'll recognize the sound too. So here's a C9, and here's a C minor 9, C9 with a C7 flat 9. Hear that? You've heard that. That's a real small stretch to it and everything. So it's so if you see C7, the chord's major, no little m. The 7th's minor because there's no MAJ, and written for us in parentheses, we're being told that it's a minor 9 in there. Okay. So the 9's always going to be major unless we get an instruction that it's flatted, or sharp. It'll never be called major or minor if it's written rightly.
So the assumption is if I put in a 9th, that the 7th is automatically there.
I was about.
Yes.
Oh, thank you,
Yes.
because I'm sitting here.
So on all of the extension chords, and as we go, there'll be some sort of exception practice in a sense, but on all the extensions, every third is in there.
Okay.
So if I say 9, I'm assuming the 1, 3, the 5, the 7, and the 9. If I say the 11, I'm assuming all
1, 3,
those.
5, 7, 9, 11.
Now the 11th, there's an exception because if I said C11, we don't like, I always say, no. We're not really crazy about that clash.
Yeah.
So on the C11, usually we leave out the third, if we call it C11. But then if I call it that, what I really had then was G minor 7th over C. So there's an easy way to say it. But yes, but we assume every third. So particularly on the 9s. So and all these, the 7th is always there, unless I were to put one of these numbers as add, and whatever. So
if you just had a C and then add 9.
Yes, we saw that on the other
We
page.
did see it on the
And that's a good question too, because sometimes people get confused with that. They'll see C add 9, or they'll see C 9, and they'll assume it just means C add the 9. But that'd be written C add 9. But if you say C9, it's assuming the 7th.
Thank you.
And it's assuming that's a minor 7th.
Right.
Because the 7th is always minor,
7th is always minor.
unless we see MAJ. It's always minor. Okay? So you see how these are fitting together?
Mm-hmm.
And it's, but most of the time, nobody really points it out. But you see, it's not, it's sort of logical, once you sort of see it and go on there. So, Look at this one on the bottom here. I'll just show you this. Sometimes you'll see this. This is a rock and roll chord, so I'll show you. Sometimes you'll see a C sharp 9 chord. Okay, you see here it says C7, C7 and a sharp 9, and it's usually played like. Sort of a funky sound or whatever. And whenever that's played, usually it's sort of a rock. It's sort of a bluesy chord. Because what happens there is, characterizing blues is you have like a C7 chord, but you play a blues scale on top of it, which has a minor third. Hear that third? So when I have a sharp 9 chord, I usually have the third on bottom, the flat 7 in the middle, and the sharp, so it gives that sort of that's not usually your offertory chord, but it's, but you may see something like that on a, like if you were doing a musical and you're passing out charts and you're bringing in some people to play, you might see something like that. So it's good to know what it means. So yes.
So with the sharp 9, it's not augmented.
We wouldn't call it augmented 9.
No,
We
but it's
just-
just
yeah.
a major.
Well, the 9 itself is augmented, and well, well, actually, if you're going back to classical theory, majors, major intervals and perfect intervals. When we lower major intervals, they're minor. When we lower perfect, they're diminished. But on all of them, we raise them, and they're technically augmented. That's sort of what you were getting at, I think. But we don't, you wouldn't see augmented 9, you would just see sharp 9. So on those, when it's, the 9 is changed, it's flat, if it's half step down, it's sharp, it's half step up. If that makes sense. So, good question. Yeah, hey, we're doing good, doing very good. Okay, so can I scoot on to the next batch? You ready to go to 13ths and 11ths? Well, let's look at the I showed you a while ago like the 11th chord. And I've shown you, and here you see can you see the 11? And I was just pointing out then that on the 11th chord, usually we leave the 4th out. Now, however, on some things we don't. On minor 11th chords, we'd have them all in there. You know the song, Jesus Messiah? Have y'all done that one? Yes. Jesus Messiah, that's a minor 11th chord. On the minors, because the 11 and the minor third doesn't bother us as much. If I have this, that gets on the nerves. So on the minor 11th, we'd have them all in there, but on the but we would never really, on anything that's written today, or mostly written today in published music, it wouldn't usually be written as C11. You might see it, but the reason is if I looked at that again, I could say that's really just a G minor 7th chord with a C in the bass. And that's a lot easier for a normal person to think. When they get up to these extension chords, they get a little bit, it's like, oh no, I'm scratching my eyes out, or whatever. But let's jump up real quick to the 13th, so then we'll be through it all. How about that? We will have made it. Let's see if I can get there. Okay. All right. So on the 13th there, so the and we'd asked this a while ago. When you say 13, you're assuming everything. You're assuming the 1, the 3, the 5, the flat 7, the 11, and the 9, 11, and 13. 13 is just a 6, an octave higher. Okay. But now let's think about something. I'm gonna play with my right hand. I'm gonna play. I think I'm gonna play a C13 chord. Think I can do it? There it is. I can't really do that kind of. So when I get to these real fat chords, there's sort of we start getting a hierarchy of the things that you have to have and the things that you can leave out. Okay. So let's think about when I'm trying to play a C13, like here are all the notes of C13. Here's a way it'd be more likely to be played. So let me tell you the things that you have to have in there. Well, the last thing you need in there that has to be there, the one thing you drop the quickest is the fifth. All right, listen, I'm going to play a C major chord. I'm going to play a C minor chord. I'm going to ask you, and tell me which one it is. I'm going to leave out the third, okay. All right, here we go. All right, now I'm going to play the next one. All right, now tell me which one was the minor. All right, I'll try it one more time. Okay, so what does the fifth tell us? Nothing. So the fifth is the first thing you can always leave out of a chord. You can leave out the fifth. Another thing you can leave out, a lot of you might not think of, you can leave off, but a lot of times on these fat chords you can leave off the tonic, the root of the chord. Why? Because the bass players can play that, or you can be playing that down in your left hand, or the organist will be playing that on the pedals. So to clean things up a little bit, you can leave that out. But the things you have to have, you always have to have to make the chord. You have to have the third, because that tells you if it's major or minor. So the third has to be in there. You have to have the 7, because the 7 with a major, minor, and 7 has this also unique flavor that has to be in there as well. And you have to have at least whatever the number name of the chord is. If it says the 13, which is the same thing as the 6, it has to be in there, or it's not a 13 chord. Okay, so I can play a C on the bottom. I could play a D flat, E, and an A. That would really be a C13 chord. I'd probably add the 9 in there because that just sounds good. And it's under my fingers, it's easy to find. And then I could do the flat 9.